The flash of a camera is a brutal, unforgiving thing. For Kimberly Shaw, it was the sound of her world breaking. One moment, she was the city's darling, standing in the opulent glow of the Grand Athenaeum's Winterlight Gala, her hand resting protectively on the swell of her 6-month pregnancy. The next, she was invisible. Because 50 feet away, illuminated by that same cruel flash of light, her husband, the self-made tech titan Grayson Shaw, was wrapping his arms around another woman. And this wasn't just any hug. It was an embrace of ownership, of intimacy, of secrets now blasted into the public eye. He was a billionaire, hugging his mistress in public, and his pregnant wife was standing right behind him. The air in their penthouse overlooking Central Park was always still, a carefully curated silence that cost a fortune to maintain. It was a silence Kimberly once found peaceful. Now it felt like a vacuum sucking the very breath from her lungs. For the past 2 months, Grayson had been a ghost in their home, a phantom who smelled of a perfume that wasn't hers, and spoke of late-night server crashes and emergency board meetings, with a fluency that bordered on rehearsed. Kimberly wasn't a fool. She was an architect, a woman who understood structure foundations and the telltale signs of stress fractures. Their marriage, once a towering skyscraper of mutual ambition and genuine affection, was showing cracks. He'd stopped touching the gentle curve of her stomach, his nightly ritual of whispering goodnight to their unborn son, replaced by the clicking of a phone being hastily silenced. His eyes, once warm pools of deep brown, that held her as if she were the only person in the universe, now skated over her, seeing not a wife and expectant mother, but an obstacle. She had built her life around him. After her own firm, Connolly & Associates, had achieved significant acclaim for its sustainable urban designs, she had agreed to step back to merge her smaller boutique company with a subsidiary of Shaw Ventures. Grayson had called it a synergy of power couples, a way for them to build an empire together. She had called it love. She had poured her energy into designing their dream home, and more recently, the nursery, a serene space of soft greys and blues filled with the quiet promise of a new life. This gala, the annual Winterlight Gala, was supposed to be their triumphant return to the social scene. After months of her quiet semi-seclusion due to a difficult first trimester, Grayson had insisted, "We need to show them we're stronger than ever, Kimberly." He had set his hands on her shoulders, his gaze just missing hers. "You, me, and our little guy. The future of the Shaw dynasty." Tau, she had chosen her gown with meticulous care, a deep emerald velvet custom-made by Oscar de la Renta that flowed over her bump with understated elegance. She wore the Connolly diamonds, a family heirloom passed down from her grandmother, a cascading waterfall of ice against her skin. As she stood before the mirror, she saw a woman who looked the part, the powerful, beloved wife of Grayson Shaw. But beneath the velvet and diamonds, a cold dread had been coiling in her stomach all evening. The Grand Athenaeum was a sea of glittering socialites, predatory journalists, and calculating business rivals. The air crackled with forced laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. Grayson was in his element, a king surveying his court. He navigated the room with a predator's grace, his hand possessively on the small of her back. He would smile for the cameras, murmur a possessive, "My beautiful wife," for the society columnists, and then his eyes would start to scan the crowd, searching. Kimberly knew he was looking for someone. The nervous energy humming off him was palpable. A tick in his jaw, a subtle tightening of his grip on her. She followed his gaze, trying to pinpoint the source of his distraction, but was constantly interrupted by well-wishers wanting to touch her belly to offer saccharine congratulations on her glow. "You must be so thrilled, Kimberly," purred Beatrice Vance, a woman whose face was pulled so tight it looked like a porcelain mask. "To have it all, the husband, the home, the baby, a true fairy tale." Kimberly managed a tight smile. "We're very blessed, Beatrice." But as Beatrice drifted away, Kimberly's eyes found Grayson again. He had detached from a conversation with a senator and was moving towards the impressionist wing. His pace was hurried, his shoulders tense. And then she saw her. The woman was a stark contrast to the old money elegance of the room. She was sharp modern, dressed in a severe blood-red gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her hair was a severe black bob, her lips painted the same shade as her dress. She commanded attention, not with softness, but with an unapologetic, sharp-edged ambition. Kimberly recognized her from a company newsletter. Zoe Novak, the new brilliant head of acquisitions at Shaw Ventures, poached from a rival firm in a move that had been lauded in the business pages. Zoe's eyes were locked on Grayson, a triumphant, possessive gleam in them that sent a shard of ice through Kimberly's heart. This was it. This was the source of the strange perfume, the late nights, the hollow space in their bed. It wasn't a server crash. It was her. Kimberly felt a strange sense of disassociation, as if she were watching a film of her own life. She should move. She should leave, scream, do something. But her feet felt like lead rooted to the plush carpet. She watched a silent, unseen spectator to her own betrayal as Grayson reached Zoe. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around to see who was watching. The embrace was not a friendly greeting. His hand slid down Zoe's back, pulling her flush against him. Zoe's arms wrapped around his neck, her manicured fingers tangling in his hair. He buried his face in her neck, and even from 50 feet away, Kimberly could see the tension leave his body replaced by a raw, unguarded relief. It was the kind of relief he used to find only with her. And then it happened. The pop and flash of a single camera from a freelance photographer lurking near the archives. The light was a merciless spotlight, freezing the moment in time, the billionaire and his mistress locked in an embrace that spoke of 1,000 stolen nights and broken promises. The light caught something else too. As Grayson pulled back slightly, his hand went to Zoe's neck. He fastened a necklace there, a delicate platinum chain from which hung a single flawless canary diamond. It was audacious. It was a statement. It was a slap in the face. The world went silent. The murmur of the crowd, the distant music, it all faded into a dull roar in Kimberly's ears. All she could hear was the frantic, panicked thumping of her own heart and the tiny fluttering kicks of the baby inside her, a baby who would be born into the wreckage of this single catastrophic moment. She brought a hand to her stomach, a reflexive gesture of protection. The photographer, seeing her, swung his camera around. Another flash. This one captured her, the wife, the mother-to-be, standing alone in the shadows, watching her perfect life burn to the ground. The journey home was a descent into a new kind of hell. The heated leather seats of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, usually a symbol of comfort and success, felt like a coffin. The silence between them was thick and suffocating, broken only by the quiet hum of the engine as their driver, Robert, navigated the glittering, indifferent streets of Manhattan. Robert's eyes, visible in the rear-view mirror, were fixed firmly on the road, a mask of professional stoicism that couldn't quite hide the pity Kimberly saw in their depths. Even the help knew. The humiliation was absolute. Grayson didn't speak. He stared out the window, the muscles in his jaw working furiously. He wasn't remorseful. He was angry. Angry he'd been caught. Kimberly watched his reflection in the tinted glass, the face of the man she had loved now twisted into the unfamiliar lines of a stranger. The love she had felt for him just hours ago had curdled into something cold and heavy in her chest, a toxic mix of grief and a burgeoning, terrifying rage. When they finally swept into the private garage beneath their building, Grayson was out of the car before it had even come to a complete stop. He didn't wait for her, didn't offer a hand. He strode towards the private elevator, a man desperate to escape the consequences of his own actions. Kimberly moved slowly, deliberately. Each step was a conscious effort to keep from crumbling. The Connolly diamonds felt like a lead weight on her neck. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was 45 seconds of suspended agony. He stood in one corner, she in the other. He finally broke the silence, his voice a low, rough growl. It wasn't what it looked like, Kim. Kimberly turned her head slowly to look at him. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. It was so insulting, so dismissive of her intelligence that it almost made her laugh. A raw, hysterical sound caught in her throat. Wasn't what it looked like, she repeated, her voice eerily calm. You mean I didn't see you embrace your employee as if you were drowning, and she was the last piece of driftwood on earth? I didn't see you fasten a diamond around her neck in the middle of the most public event of the year. Please, Grayson, do enlighten me. What was it I saw? The elevator doors opened into their private foyer. He swept past her into the grand living room, the floor-to-ceiling windows displaying a panoramic view of the city that now felt like a taunt. He finally turned to face her, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his signature move when he was trying to regain control. Zoe has been under a lot of pressure. He began, his voice taking on the placating tone he used with difficult board members. The Sterling acquisition is a monster of a deal. She closed it. That necklace? It was a bonus, a corporate gift. The hug was congratulatory. It was a moment of professional relief. The photographer twisted it into something sordid. Kimberly walked towards the bar, her movements measured. She didn't want a drink. She wanted a weapon. She wanted to hurl one of the heavy crystal decanters through the window and watch the glittering city fracture along with her life. Instead, she rested her hands on the cool marble, gripping it until her knuckles turned white. A corporate gift. Grayson, you gave her a Leviev yellow diamond. I know because you showed it to me last month and said you were considering it for my push present. The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Did you forget who you told? Or do you just lie so often you can't keep track anymore? His face paled. He had been caught in a lie so specific, so careless that there was no way to spin it. The mask of control slipped, revealing the cornered animal beneath. It's not. It's complicated, he stammered. No, it's not, she said, turning to face him fully, her eyes blazing with a cold fire he had never seen before. It's brutally simple. You are sleeping with Zoe Novak. You have been for months. You have been lying to me every single day while I carry your son. You disrespected me, our marriage, and our child in the most public way imaginable, because you are arrogant enough to believe there are no consequences for your actions. See simple. He stared at her, momentarily speechless. He had expected tears, screaming a dramatic scene he could manage and control. He had not expected this icy, precise dissection of his pathetic betrayal. He tried a different tactic vulnerability. Kim, I've been lost, he said, taking a step towards her. The pressure of the business, the baby. It's a lot. I made a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. But it's you I love. It has always been you. She means nothing. The words were textbook. They were the hollow script of every cheating husband in history. And they meant nothing. For Kimberly, the love wasn't just gone. It had been annihilated. In its place, something new was taking root. a cold, hard resolve. "Stop talking," she said, her voice dangerously low. "Don't you dare say you love me. You don't get to use that word as a shield for your weakness. You don't get to use our son as an excuse for your betrayal." She walked past him, heading towards the master suite. "I want you to leave," she said, without looking back. "What, Kim, don't be ridiculous. This is my home." She stopped at the door and turned a mirthless smile touching her lips. "This is our home, which you have desecrated, and right now I can't stand to breathe the same air as you. Go to a hotel. Go to her. Frankly, I don't care. Just get out." "We need to talk about this," he pleaded, a note of panic in his voice. "We can fix this." "There is no we to fix." Kimberly stated each word a final, damning verdict. "You burned that bridge tonight. Now get out of my house." She walked into their bedroom and closed the door, the soft click of the latch echoing in the cavernous apartment like a gunshot. She didn't lock it. That would have been an act of fear. This was an act of command. She leaned against the cool wood of the door, her body finally starting to tremble. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation began to drain away, leaving behind a deep, seismic pain. She slid down the door to the floor, wrapping her arms around her stomach, around her son. The tears came then hot and silent. They weren't tears of a victim. They were tears of grief for the man she thought she had married for the future that had been stolen from her. And as she wept in the darkness of her gilded cage, a new steely resolve began to form in the ruins of her heart. Grayson thought this was a mistake he could manage. He had no idea he hadn't just broken his marriage. He had declared war on the wrong woman. The first light of dawn spilled over the city, casting long shadows across the pristine, white marble floors of the penthouse. Kimberly had not slept. She had sat in the dark, watching the city lights blink out one by one, feeling the last vestiges of the woman she used to be slip away. The grief was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, the foundations of her new reality were setting like concrete. She was no longer just an architect of buildings. She would now be the architect of Grayson's downfall. She showered and dressed not in soft loungewear, but in a tailored black dress, her armor, as she used to call it when facing a tough client. She pulled her hair back into a severe chignon. Looking in the mirror, she saw the faint smudges of exhaustion under her eyes, but in their depths was a glint of steel. Her first call was not to her mother or her best friend. It was to her older brother, Leo Connolly. Leo was the antithesis of Grayson. Quiet, methodical, and fiercely protective, he ran the financial arm of what was left of their family's old money legacy. He was the anchor in her life. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Kim, it's 6 a.m. Is the baby okay?" "The baby is fine," she said, her voice steady. "But my marriage is over." There was a pause, then the sound of him sitting up, instantly alert. "What happened? I saw the gala photos are already all over. Page 6. "It's exactly what it looks like, Leo," she said, skipping the painful details. He could read about them like everyone else. "I need help. Not emotional support, not yet. I need a professional. I need the best divorce attorney in New York. Someone who isn't afraid to go up against Grayson Shaw. Someone who plays to win, no matter how dirty it gets." Leo didn't waste time with condolences. He understood the shift in her tone. This was business. "I know a man. Benjamin Carter. They call him the Shark, for a reason. He's ruthless discreet, and he despises new money tech bros like Grayson. I'll have his office clear his schedule. He'll meet you whenever you're ready." "I'm ready now," Kimberly said. "Book it for 10 a.m. Her second call was to a number she had saved years ago, a relic from a past security concern. It was to a private investigation firm, run by an ex-Mossad agent named Ronan. He specialized in corporate and marital espionage, with a reputation for unearthing secrets people would kill to keep buried. "Ronan, it's Kimberly Shaw," she said when he answered. "Mrs. Shaw. It has been a long time. I trust you are well." His voice was gravelly, with a hint of an Israeli accent. "I have a job for you," she said, cutting to the chase. "I want everything you can find on Zoe Novak. Everything. Education, past employment, financials, social circles, ex-lovers, any skeletons in her closet, no matter how small. I also want a full workup on my husband, Grayson Shaw. I want to know every deal he's made in the last 6 months, every meeting, every dinner, every discrepancy in Shaw Ventures books. I want to know where the money is going, all of it. The budget is unlimited." "Understood," Ronan said, a hint of professional appreciation in his voice. "We will be invisible. You will have your first report within 48 hours." Her final act of the morning was to walk into Grayson's home office. The room was a monument to his ego, all dark wood, polished chrome and cutting-edge technology. His password was predictably their anniversary date. It was a pathetic, sentimental choice for a man so calculating. A rookie mistake. She logged in. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she was a hunter now. She bypassed his personal emails, knowing they would be a minefield of painful details she didn't have the strength for yet. Instead, she went for the financial folders, the corporate accounts. She began to copy files, terabytes of data, onto a series of encrypted hard drives she had purchased for a past architectural project. Shaw Ventures quarterly reports, internal audits, offshore account, statements and files labeled with cryptic project names like Project Nightingale and Phoenix Initiative. She didn't understand all of it, but Ben Carter and his forensic accountants would. Just as she was finishing, her phone buzzed. It was Grayson. Then again, and again. A string of texts followed. "Kim, please pick up. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I can fix this. I'll fire her today. Don't do anything rash. Think about the baby." The last text made her blood run cold. He was using their child as a bargaining chip, a shield. She typed a single cold response. "All communication will now go through my attorney. You will be hearing from him shortly." She blocked his number. At 9:45 a.m., she walked out of the penthouse carrying a sleek leather briefcase containing the hard drives. She didn't look back. As she rode the elevator down, she felt a profound shift. The penthouse was no longer her home. It was a crime scene. Grayson was no longer her husband. He was her opponent. Benjamin Carter's office was in a discreet midtown skyscraper, a world of muted colors, expensive art, and hushed confidence. Carter himself was in his late 50s with piercing blue eyes and a stillness that was more intimidating than any overt aggression. He didn't offer platitudes. He listened, his gaze unwavering, as Kimberly laid out the facts of the gala with cold architectural precision. She concluded her summary and pushed one of the hard drives across the polished mahogany desk. "That is a copy of my husband's private server. I want a full forensic accounting. He's been careless lately, arrogant. I believe you will find things that are of interest." A slow smile spread across Carter's face. It was the smile of a shark scenting blood in the water. "Mrs. Shaw," he said, his voice a purr of professional delight. "Most wives come in here with tears and tissues. You've come in with a battle plan and ammunition. I have a feeling you and I are going to work together very, very well." "I don't want to just divorce him, Mr. Carter," Kimberly said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with the intensity of her newfound purpose. "I don't just want half of his assets. I want to understand why. And then I want to dismantle the empire he built on my trust. I want him to know what it feels like to have the foundations of his world turned to dust." Carter leaned back in his chair, the smile widening. "Kimberly," he said, dropping the formality. "Call me Ben. And I can assure you, by the time we are done, Grayson Shaw will wish he had only broken your heart." The first report from Ronan arrived 72 hours later, not as an email, but as a sealed black envelope delivered by a courier with no return address. Kimberly sat at the kitchen island of her brother Leo's townhouse, her new temporary sanctuary, and read its contents. The information on Zoe Novak was both banal and illuminating. Zoe was the picture of relentless ambition. Born to a working-class family in Ohio, she had clawed her way into a scholarship at Wharton, then through a series of increasingly prestigious firms on Wall Street. Her reputation was that of a brilliant but ruthless deal-maker who left a trail of burned bridges and resentful colleagues in her wake. There were whispers of her using intimate relationships with superiors to gain advantages, but nothing ever proven, nothing that ever stuck. She was smart. Ronan had also uncovered her financials. For a woman on a generous but not astronomical salary, she lived extravagantly. A loft in Soho that should have been far beyond her means, a wardrobe of designer clothes, a standing reservation at the most exclusive restaurants. The money was coming from somewhere. Ronan's preliminary analysis traced it to a series of wire transfers from a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. The name of the corporation was Nightingale Holdings. Kimberly's blood ran cold. Project Nightingale was one of the folders she had copied from Grayson's server. She immediately called Ben Carter. "Ben, I have something. A shell corporation. Nightingale Holdings." She could hear the furious clicking of keys on his end. "Got it," he said after a moment. "It's one of his. Registered 18 months ago. It's been funding Zoe Novak's lifestyle to the tune of about $2 million over the last year. He didn't just give her a job, Kimberly. He set her up. He bought and paid for her entire life." The calculation of it was staggering. This wasn't a whirlwind affair, a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a long-term, premeditated campaign of deceit. Grayson had been building a separate life with this woman, funding it with their money, all while Kimberly was at home, planning their future, planning their family. "There's more," Ben said, his voice tight with excitement. "My forensic team has been tearing through the data you brought me. Nightingale Holdings isn't just a slush fund for his mistress. It's an active investment vehicle, and its primary target is a company called Connolly Renewables." Kimberly felt the air leave her lungs. Connolly Renewables was the modern iteration of the company her great-grandfather had founded, a pioneering engineering firm that had been the cornerstone of her family's wealth and reputation for generations. Her father had been forced to sell a majority stake during a market downturn a decade ago, a decision that had broken his heart. The company had since been mismanaged into near bankruptcy by a corporate raider. "What about it?" Kimberly asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Grayson is using Nightingale Holdings to secretly buy up its debt," Ben explained. "He's been acquiring it for pennies on the dollar. Once he controls the debt, he'll control the company. He's staging a hostile takeover, Kimberly, from the shadows." The pieces began to click into place with sickening clarity. Grayson knew how much that company meant to her family's legacy. She remembered conversations late at night where she'd lamented its decline, fantasized about one day buying it back and restoring it to its former glory. Was this his plan to betray her, then present her, with her family's company, on a silver platter as a grand redemptive gesture, a way to wash away his sins with an extravagant manipulative gift? The sheer godlike arrogance of it was infuriating. He was playing with her family's history, with her deepest desires, as if it were all a game he could control. But Ronan's report contained another more disturbing detail. Zoe Novak, before joining Shore Ventures, had worked for the very private equity firm that had mismanaged Connolly Renewables into the ground. She knew its finances, its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities inside and out. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a strategic asset. Grayson hadn't hired her for her ambition. He'd hired her for her inside knowledge. The betrayal deepened, branching out from the personal to the professional, infecting every part of her life. Her marriage, her career, her family's legacy. It was all entangled in his web of lies. That evening, Leo found her staring out the window, a storm raging outside that mirrored the tempest in her soul. "What is it, Kim?" he asked gently. "He's trying to buy the old Connolly company," she said, her voice flat. "He's using Zoe's inside knowledge to do it. He was going to give it to me as a gift, I think. A trophy to make up for his affair." Leo was silent for a long moment, processing the layers of manipulation. "The man's ego is a marvel of engineering," he finally said, his voice laced with disgust. "What are you going to do?" Kimberly turned from the window, her eyes clear and resolute. "A grand gesture deserves a grand response. Don't you think he wants to play God with my family's legacy? He thinks he's the king moving all the pieces on the board. He's forgotten one thing." "What's that? I'm a Connolly," she said, a flicker of a predatory smile on her lips. "And this is my family's board. He's about to find out what it feels like to be a pawn in someone else's game." The plan began to form in her mind, intricate and precise, like one of her own architectural blueprints. Grayson had underestimated her. He saw her as a wife, a mother-to-be, an emotional creature he could manage. He had forgotten she was the woman who had built her own celebrated firm from the ground up. He had forgotten she had a mind that saw all the angles, a mind that knew how to build, and a mind that knew how to demolish. She picked up her phone and dialed Ben Carter. "Ben," she said, her voice humming with a newfound power, "I need you to find out who the other major debt holders are for Connolly Renewables. And I need a meeting with the board of Shore Ventures, not as Grayson's wife, as a shareholder. It's time to talk about fiduciary duty and conflicts of interest." The war had begun. The days that followed were a blur of encrypted emails, hushed phone calls, and clandestine meetings in sterile law offices. Kimberly, with Leo and Ben Carter's team, worked with a singular, ferocious focus. They were no longer just reacting to Grayson's betrayal. They were building a fortress and sharpening their spears. Ben's team confirmed her horrifying suspicion. Grayson's plan was even more insidious than she had imagined. He called it the Phoenix Initiative. The idea was to acquire Connolly Renewables through the Shell Corporation, absorb its valuable patents into Shore Ventures, and then let the original company, the Connolly name, die, taking its pension obligations and other liabilities with it. Then, after the birth of their son, he would launch a new Connolly Shore green energy subsidiary, presenting it to Kimberly as a joint legacy for their child. He wasn't saving her family's company. He was gutting it for parts and using its hollowed-out corpse as a PR stunt to mask his infidelity. But the most damning discovery came from a deep dive into the financial structure of the takeover. To fund the massive debt acquisition, Grayson hadn't just used his own capital. He had, through a series of complex and legally dubious maneuvers, leveraged assets from a trust fund. It was a trust Kimberly's grandfather had established for his future great-grandchildren. It was the money she had earmarked for her son's future. He was gambling with their child's inheritance to fund a scheme with his mistress. The rage that filled Kimberly was so pure, so absolute, it burned away any remaining vestiges of sorrow. This was no longer about a broken heart. This was about the violation of a sacred trust, an attack on the future of her unborn child. "He's crossed a line," she told Leo, her voice trembling with fury. "This isn't just immoral, it's illegal. This is grounds for his removal from the company, from any company. The Shaw Ventures board is loyal to him, Kim," Leo warned. "They're a boys' club of his own making. They won't oust their golden goose over a messy divorce and some creative accounting. They will if the alternative is having the SEC and the Southern District of New York crawling all over their books," Kimberly countered. "And they will if their largest minority shareholder presents them with a viable alternative." That was the crux of her plan. Through her marriage and her own savvy pre-Grayson investments, Kimberly controlled a not insignificant 8% of Shaw Ventures. Leo, through his family office, controlled another 4%. Together they represented a powerful voting bloc. Her next move was to approach the other key shareholders, starting with Robert Chen, a cautious old money investor who controlled a 10% stake and had always been wary of Grayson's aggressive high-risk strategies. They met in a private room at the University Club. Kimberly didn't lead with the infidelity. She led with the numbers. She laid out the blueprints of Grayson's scheme, the Shell Corporation, the conflict of interest with Zoe Novak, the reckless leveraging of assets, and the immense legal and financial exposure it brought upon Shaw Ventures. She presented it not as a scorned wife, but as a concerned shareholder protecting her investment. "Grayson's personal behavior has now become a material risk to this company," she stated calmly, sliding a file across the table. "He is using corporate funds to finance his affair and company resources to engage in a hostile takeover that benefits him personally, not the shareholders. Worse, he's leveraged a private trust in a way that borders on fraud. When this comes out, and it will, the stock will plummet and we will all be facing federal investigation." Chen read through the summary, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is deeply troubling," he said, his fingers steepled. "But Grayson delivers results. The board will be reluctant to act." "Which is why I'm not just bringing them a problem," Kimberly said, leaning forward. "I'm bringing them a solution. I have been in quiet negotiations with the other primary debt holders of Connolly Renewables. With my own capital and a consortium of investors I've assembled, I am staging a counteroffer. I'm going to take Connolly Renewables private myself. I will save the company, honor its obligations, and rebuild it. I will do it the right way." She let that sink in. "When I've done that," she continued, "Grayson's Phoenix initiative will be worthless. All the capital he's poured into Nightingale Holdings will be lost. It will be the single biggest strategic failure in Shaw Ventures' history. The stock will tank anyway. Or," she paused, letting the final piece of her plan fall into place, "the board can get ahead of it. They can force Grayson to divest from the project, now writing it off as a minor loss. They can install an interim CEO to calm the markets, and they can support my acquisition, which will then become a strategic partnership, with Shaw Ventures turning a scandal into a feel-good story of corporate synergy and family legacy." Chen looked at her, a newfound respect dawning in his eyes. She wasn't just trying to hurt Grayson. She was offering the board a way out, a golden bridge to escape the fire that was coming. "And who do you propose as this interim CEO?" he asked. Kimberly gave him a small, confident smile. "Who better than the person who uncovered the risk and engineered the solution? I'm not just a shareholder, Robert. I ran my own successful firm for 10 years. I know how to build things. And right now, Shaw Ventures needs someone to rebuild its integrity." It was an audacious move, a breathtaking gamble. She wasn't just planning to divorce her husband. She was planning a boardroom coup. She was going to take his company. For the next week, Kimberly and Leo worked the phones, relentlessly building their coalition. They secured the backing of Chen and 2 other major institutional investors. Together, they now controlled 35% of the voting shares. It might not be a majority, but it was enough to cause a firestorm. The stage was set. Ben Carter formally requested an emergency meeting of the Shaw Ventures Board of Directors. The stated purpose on the agenda was bland and corporate. To discuss a potential conflict of interest regarding Project Nightingale and its implications for shareholder value. Grayson would walk into that room, expecting a minor financial dispute. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. Kimberly placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady kick of her son. "We're almost there," she thought. "I'm building a better world for you. One without your father's lies." The boardroom of Shaw Ventures was on the 80th floor, a glass-encased precipice that seemed to float above the city. It was Grayson's throne room, designed to intimidate and impress. On the morning of the meeting, however, the mood was not one of awe, but of thick, anxious tension. Grayson arrived last, exuding a forced, breezy confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. He had lost weight in the past weeks. The strain was showing. He nodded curtly to the board members, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Kimberly, who was seated at the far end of the long mahogany table, flanked by Ben Carter and her brother Leo. His eyes widened in genuine shock. He had expected to face her lawyers, not her. Seeing her there, calm and composed, in a stark white dress that accentuated her pregnancy, clearly unnerved him. She looked regal, untouchable. Beside her, Leo looked like a stoic sentinel. "Kimberly," Grayson began, his voice tight. "This is hardly the appropriate venue." "On the contrary, Grayson," she interrupted, her voice cool and clear, carrying across the silent room. "Given that you've so thoroughly blurred the lines between our personal life and this company's business, I can think of no more appropriate venue. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss." The other board members shifted uncomfortably. This was already far more personal than the agenda had suggested. Robert Chen, the senior board member Kimberly had won over, cleared his throat. "Grayson, this meeting has been called to address serious allegations regarding Project Nightingale. We'd like to hear your side." Grayson launched into his pre-prepared defense, a smooth and plausible narrative about a strategic acquisition designed to enter the green energy sector. He painted it as a visionary move, a surprise he had been planning for the company and his family. He completely omitted any mention of Zoe Novak by name, referring only to the invaluable analysis of our head of acquisitions. He thought he was controlling the narrative. He was wrong. When he finished, Kimberly didn't respond. She simply nodded to Ben Carter. Carter stood and began to distribute a thick, spiral-bound dossier to each board member. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant and authoritative. "What Mr. Shaw has just described is a fiction. What you have in your hands is the fact." For the next 20 minutes, Carter systematically, dispassionately, and brutally dismantled Grayson's life. He presented bank statements from Nightingale Holdings, showing direct payments to Zoe Novak for her apartment, her car, her lavish lifestyle, all funded by a corporate account. He showed emails between Grayson and Zoe discussing not just the affair, but the specific proprietary weaknesses of Connolly Renewables she had brought with her from her previous employer, a clear case of corporate espionage. A low murmur went through the room. Grayson's face had gone from confident to ashen. Then Carter moved to the final fatal blow. "And finally," he said, flipping to the last tab, "you will find the documentation proving that to secure the final round of financing for this project, Mr. Shaw illegally leveraged a private, non-corporate asset as collateral, specifically the Connolly family trust, an instrument established for the benefit of his unborn child. A collective gasp went through the room. This wasn't just a dalliance or a shady deal. This was a profound, indefensible breach of ethics, a potential felony. They were looking at racketeering wire fraud, a full-blown SEC nightmare. "The personal indiscretion is Mr. Shaw's own business," Carter concluded, his eyes locking on Grayson. "But the corporate malfeasance, the fraud, the exposure of this company to massive legal and financial risk, that is the board's business." Grayson stared at Kimberly, his eyes a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "You," he whispered, the single word filled with venom. "You did this?" Kimberly finally met his gaze, her own expression unreadable. "You did this to yourself?" "Grayson," she said, her voice even. "I am simply protecting my interests, my son's interests, and the interests of every other shareholder in this room." Robert Chen spoke, his voice heavy with finality. "Grayson, in light of this information, we have no choice. The board has lost confidence in your leadership. We are asking for your immediate resignation as CEO and chairman." The king had been deposed in his own throne room. But Kimberly wasn't finished. Before Grayson could respond, she addressed the board. "His resignation is only the first step," she said, her voice now filled with command. "Shaw Ventures must immediately divest from Nightingale Holdings and cease all action related to the acquisition of Connolly Renewables. It is a tainted, failed project that will only bring this company ruin." "And what happens then?" another board member asked. "The capital is lost. The strategy is dead." "Not entirely," Kimberly said, standing up. It was a power move, drawing every eye to her. "As it happens, I have spent the last several weeks organizing a private consortium to acquire Connolly Renewables myself. We close tomorrow. My intention is to rebuild it into the powerhouse it once was." She let the audacity of her move settle over them. "This board has two choices," she declared. "You can let this scandal break, let the stock plummet and spend the next 5 years in litigation. Or you can partner with me. We announce Grayson's resignation for personal reasons. We announce a new strategic partnership between Shaw Ventures and the newly revitalized Connolly Renewables, led by me. You turn this catastrophic failure into a story of innovation and stability. And to oversee this new chapter, you appoint an interim CEO who understands the challenges ahead and has a vested interest in a stable, profitable future for this company." She paused, looking each board member in the eye. "You appoint me." Silence. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. She hadn't just come to depose the king. She had come to take his throne. Grayson finally broke a harsh, strangled laugh escaping his lips. "They will never," he hissed, "they will never give my company to you." But as Kimberly looked at the faces around the table, faces of panicked, pragmatic business people who saw a lifeline being thrown to them, she knew he was wrong. They weren't seeing the betrayed wife anymore. They were seeing a savior, a shark every bit as ruthless as the man they were about to throw to the wolves. Robert Chen looked from Grayson's enraged, defeated face to Kimberly's cool, determined one. He made a decision. All those in favor of accepting Mr. Shaw's resignation. Every hand but Grayson's went up. And all those in favor of appointing Kimberly Connolly as interim CEO effective immediately. Again, a forest of hands. It was over. In the space of 30 minutes, Kimberly had taken everything from him. His company, his reputation, his future. She had not just divorced him. She had erased him. Grayson stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. He looked at Kimberly, his face a mask of pure fury. "You will regret this," he seethed. Kimberly looked back at him, her expression unyielding. "The only thing I regret," she said, her voice dropping so only he could hear, "is that I didn't see who you truly were sooner. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Shaw, this is a private meeting for the board and its CEO. Security will see you out." 6 months later, the city was blanketed in the first snow of a new year. From her office, Grayson's old office now redesigned with clean lines, light wood and sketches of her architectural projects, Kimberly looked out at the swirling white flakes. Her world, once shattered, had been rebuilt on a foundation of her own making. The fallout from the boardroom coup had been swift and brutal. Grayson Shaw, once the titan of the tech world, became a pariah. The details of the scandal, expertly leaked by Ben Carter's office to select financial journalists, painted a picture not of a powerful man brought down by a scorned woman, but of a reckless CEO whose personal failings had threatened his entire company. He was facing multiple SEC investigations and a slew of shareholder lawsuits. He had vanished from the public eye, rumored to be holed up in a villa in Dubai, his fortune vastly diminished by the divorce settlement and legal fees. Zoe Novak had disappeared even more completely. Fired for cause and facing her own legal troubles for corporate espionage, her career was over. She was a footnote in the story of Grayson's downfall, a casualty of a war she hadn't been equipped to fight. Kimberly, however, had thrived. As interim CEO of Shaw Ventures, a title the board quickly made permanent, she had moved decisively. She stabilized the company, cut the fat from Grayson's vanity projects, and refocused its mission on sustainable long-term growth. She proved to be a natural leader, her quiet, analytical style, a welcome change from Grayson's volatile charisma. Her true passion, however, was Connolly Renewables. She poured her heart and soul into it, bringing in a new management team, investing in research and development, and securing major new contracts. She was not just restoring her family's legacy. She was making it her own, forging it into something stronger and more innovative than it had ever been. But her greatest achievement was not in the boardroom. 3 months ago, she had given birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She had named her Grace Connolly, not Shaw. The nursery, once a space of anxious hope, was now a sanctuary of pure joy. Kimberly found a balance she never knew was possible, leaving the office at a reasonable hour trading stock reports for story time and finding more fulfillment in her daughter's gurgling laugh than in any billion-dollar deal. Her brother Leo was a constant, doting presence, the perfect uncle. Her life was filled with a quiet, authentic happiness that the gilded cage of her marriage had never allowed. One afternoon, as she was rocking Grace to sleep, her phone buzzed with a message from an unsaved number. She opened it. It was a single sentence. "I hope you're happy." She knew it was from Grayson. There was no anger in the message, only a hollowed-out emptiness. For a fleeting moment, she felt a sliver of pity for the man he had become. But it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of peace. She didn't delete the message. She didn't block the number. She simply typed a one-word reply. "I am." She put the phone down and looked at the sleeping baby in her arms, her daughter, her future. The empire Grayson had built was a thing of the past, a monument to a failed king. The empire she was building, now an empire of integrity, legacy, and love, was just beginning. She was Kimberly Connolly, CEO, mother survivor. And for the first time in a very long time, she was free. So what happens when a woman's perfect life is revealed to be a perfect lie? For Kimberly Shaw, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. She transformed her deepest heartbreak into her greatest strength, proving that the most powerful empires aren't built on money or deceit, but on resilience and truth. She didn't just get revenge. She got redemption. reclaiming her name, her legacy, and her future for herself and her child. Her story is a powerful reminder that the person you become in the face of betrayal is a choice. You can crumble, or you can build something even more magnificent from the ruins. What did you think of Kimberly's ultimate move? Was it justice, or was it a masterclass in revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of strength and strategy, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good story of triumph, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat.